Jupiter is beautiful from Earth, but here's what nobody tells you. Getting back from there might be the hardest thing humans have ever attempted in space exploration. Not landing on it, not surviving near it, getting home. Think about that for a second. We've sent spacecraft to Jupiter before, several of them actually. Galileo orbited the gas giant for years. Juno is there right now, collecting data and sending back those stunning images you've probably seen. But here's the thing that should make you pause. Not a single one of those spacecraft ever came back. And that wasn't an oversight. It was by design, because returning from Jupiter is so monumentally difficult that NASA's solution has always been the same. Don't even try. Just crash the probe into Jupiter's atmosphere when you're done and call it a day. This isn't about technology we haven't invented yet. It's about physics that doesn't care what we invent. The challenges aren't just hard. They're stacked on top of each other in ways that make each problem worse. Fuel requirements that spiral out of control. Radiation that fries electronics and would cook a human crew. Timescales that dwarf any mission we've ever flown. And that's just the beginning. Let's start with the most basic problem. Getting off Jupiter's metaphorical doorstep requires nearly as much energy as launching from Earth's surface into orbit in the first place. Wrap your head around that. You've already traveled almost 500 million miles. You've spent years getting there. Your spacecraft has survived the journey through deep space. And now, just to start heading home, you need to spend roughly the same amount of energy that got you off the ground on Earth. The numbers are brutal. From a low Earth orbit, reaching Jupiter requires a delta V of about 9 kilometers per second. Delta V is what mission planners call the total change in velocity your spacecraft needs to achieve. It's the currency of space travel. And to leave Jupiter's gravitational influence and begin the journey back, another massive delta V expenditure. We're talking about a total round-trip budget that could exceed 40 kilometers per second when you add up all the orbital maneuvers, course corrections, and velocity changes needed. But velocity changes don't come free. They require propellant. And here's where the tyranny of the rocket equation kicks you in the teeth. Every kilogram of fuel you need for the return journey must be carried with you from Earth, which means you need more fuel to lift that fuel, which means you need even more fuel to lift that additional fuel. The mass grows exponentially. It's like compound interest, except instead of making you rich, it makes your spacecraft impossibly heavy. Current chemical rockets can't handle this. The fuel tanks alone would be larger than anything we've ever launched. You'd need a spacecraft the size of a small building just to carry enough propellant for a return trip. And that's before adding any scientific equipment, crew quarters, or life support systems. This is why every Jupiter mission so far has been one way. The math simply doesn't work with conventional propulsion. Some engineers suggest using gravity assists to help with the return journey. Juno used this trick to get to Jupiter in the first place. The spacecraft flew by Earth, borrowed some of our planet's momentum as it whipped around us, and gained an extra 7 kilometers per second of velocity without burning a drop of fuel. For a return mission, you could theoretically use Jupiter's moons or planets you encounter on the way back to provide similar boosts. Sounds clever, right? It is. But there's a catch. Actually, several catches. Each gravity assist must be perfectly timed. The planets need to be in exactly the right positions. Miss your window by a few days, and you might have to wait months or years for another opportunity. String multiple assists together, and the trajectory planning becomes a nightmare of orbital mechanics. Plus, all those detours add time to an already lengthy mission. Years. Potentially many years. And speaking of time, let's talk about just how long a Jupiter return mission would take. Juno took 5 years to reach Jupiter. 5 years. That was one direction, and that was without carrying all the extra mass needed for a return trip. A round-trip mission, you're looking at a decade minimum, possibly much longer depending on the trajectory and whether you use gravity assists. A decade in space isn't like a decade on Earth. Systems that need to function flawlessly for 10 years straight. Life support that can't fail even once. Electronics that must survive not just the journey, but the destination. Because here's where things get truly terrifying. Jupiter's radiation environment. Remember how I said Jupiter is beautiful from Earth? Up close, it's trying to kill you. Jupiter generates a magnetic field that makes Earth's look pathetic by comparison. It's 20,000 times stronger than our planet's magnetic field. And it spins fast. Once every 10 hours, this massive magnetic dynamo rotates, dragging charged particles along with it and accelerating them to incredible energies. The result is a radiation belt that would make Earth's Van Allen belts look like a gentle sunbeam. We're not talking about the kind of radiation you get from a chest X-ray or even from standing next to Chernobyl. This is a constant bombardment of high-energy particles that tears through everything in its path. The radiation isn't coming from somewhere. It is somewhere. It's a physical presence, a kind of space weather that fills Jupiter's magnetosphere, which stretches on average about 20 million kilometers across. That's about 150 times wider than Jupiter itself. For context, the Juno spacecraft was designed to handle up to 20 million rads of radiation over its mission lifetime. Engineers built a special vault made of titanium with walls a centimeter thick, weighing 180 kilograms just to protect the most sensitive electronics. And even with all that shielding, by orbit 56, Juno's camera was showing serious radiation damage. Images were corrupted. A voltage regulator had been fried. Now imagine you're not a hardy robotic probe. You're human. Flesh and blood and DNA that really doesn't appreciate being bombarded by high-energy particles. At Io, Jupiter's innermost large moon, you'd absorb about 36 sieverts per day without shielding. Europa, a bit farther out, still over 5 sieverts daily. To put that in perspective, less than 1 sievert received over a few days is enough to cause radiation sickness. 4 to 5 sieverts will likely kill you. We're talking about daily doses that would be fatal within days, possibly hours. Shielding helps, but it can't solve the problem. Radiation protection adds mass, lots of mass. And remember what we said about mass earlier? Every kilogram makes the fuel problem worse. For a crewed mission, you'd need enough shielding to protect not just electronics, but human bodies for months or years. The shielding requirements alone could represent a significant fraction of your spacecraft's total mass, compounding the already impossible propulsion challenge. Even if you solve the shielding issue, long-term exposure to lower radiation doses causes its own problems. Increased cancer risk, cataracts, damage to the central nervous system, cardiovascular disease. The biological effects of spending years near Jupiter are poorly understood because no human has ever ventured that far beyond Earth's protective magnetic bubble. You'd be a test subject in an experiment with no control group and no possibility of early termination if things go wrong. Then there's the communication delay. At Jupiter's distance, radio signals take about 45 minutes to make the one-way trip to Earth. That's a 90-minute round trip for any message. Have an emergency. You're on your own for at least an hour and a half before mission control even knows something's wrong, let alone can offer advice. Real-time control from Earth is impossible. Every decision must be made autonomously by the spacecraft systems or by the crew themselves. This fundamentally changes how space operations work. On the International Space Station, mission control can talk astronauts through procedures in real time. For lunar missions, the delay is only a couple of seconds. Even Mars rovers, with their longer communication lag, can wait for instructions because they're robotic. But a crewed Jupiter mission? You're essentially on your own. Medical emergencies, system failures, navigation decisions, all of it must be handled without Earth's immediate support. The psychological toll of such isolation is hard to overstate. You're farther from home than any human has ever been. The Earth is a dot, barely distinguishable from the stars. Your family's voices take 90 minutes for a conversation. If something goes catastrophically wrong, rescue is impossible. There's no cavalry coming over the hill. You either solve the problem yourself or you die in the most remote and hostile environment humans have ever reached. And we haven't even talked about power generation yet. At Jupiter's distance from the Sun, solar panels receive only about 4% of the energy they'd get in Earth orbit. 4%. To generate enough power for life support, systems operations, and propulsion, you'd need solar arrays so enormous they'd be unwieldy and vulnerable to damage from micrometeoroids and radiation. The alternative is nuclear power. Radioisotope thermoelectric generators have powered deep space missions for decades, but they're limited in output and require plutonium-238, which is expensive and in short supply. A crewed mission would need far more power than RTGs can provide. You'd probably need an actual nuclear reactor, adding complexity, mass, and a whole new category of safety concerns to an already overwhelming engineering challenge. But let's say you've somehow solved all of these problems. You've got enough fuel through some magical new propulsion system. Your radiation shielding is adequate. Your crew is trained and psychologically prepared. Your power systems are robust. Now you face the final challenge, actually getting home. Coming back from Jupiter means re-entering Earth's atmosphere at speeds that would make Apollo astronauts nervous. The velocity you'd be carrying after a Jupiter return trajectory could exceed 14 kilometers per second. That's faster than any crewed spacecraft has ever re-entered Earth's atmosphere. the heat generated during re-entry would be intense enough to create plasma temperatures exceeding anything the Apollo heat shields experienced. You could use aerobraking or aero capture to slow down without burning fuel, but that means diving into Earth's atmosphere at these insane velocities and trusting that your heat shield can handle the thermal loads. Get the angle wrong by a fraction of a degree, and you either skip off the atmosphere back into space or burn up. There's no margin for error. And remember, you've been in space for a decade. Your spacecraft has been bombarded by radiation, stressed by temperature extremes, and potentially degraded by years of exposure to the space environment. Now you're asking it to survive the most violent re-entry ever attempted. This is why no spacecraft has ever returned from Jupiter. It's not that we couldn't build something capable of making the trip. It's that building something capable of surviving the trip, accomplishing useful work there, and then making it back represents a convergence of challenges that pushes against the limits of what's physically possible with our current understanding of engineering and physics. Every problem compounds every other problem. The fuel you need makes the spacecraft heavier, which requires more shielding, which makes it even heavier, which requires more fuel. The timescales involved make system reliability paramount, but the radiation environment degrades systems faster than anywhere else we've been. The distance makes communication difficult, but the complexity of the mission demands constant coordination. And this is just the beginning. We haven't even scratched the surface of what a human crew would face during a decade-long round trip to Jupiter. The physiological changes from years in microgravity, the life support systems that must recycle every molecule of water and air without failure, the food supply for a journey that long, the medical facilities needed for emergencies that will inevitably arise over such an extended mission. The question isn't whether returning from Jupiter is difficult. The question is whether it's possible at all with anything resembling current technology. And if it is possible, whether any crew would be willing to accept the risks involved for a mission that would consume a decade of their lives and expose them to dangers we can barely quantify. So what would it actually take to bring humans back from Jupiter? What would the spacecraft look like? How would the crew survive? And perhaps most importantly, why would we even attempt such a mission in the first place? Let's start with the most fundamental question. What kind of spacecraft could even attempt this journey? You can't just scale up a Mars mission design and call it good. The engineering requirements are so different that you're essentially starting from scratch. Think about what this vehicle needs to do. It has to protect a crew for 10 years, accelerate to speeds that would take it to Jupiter in a reasonable time frame, carry enough fuel to break into orbit around Jupiter, conduct operations there, then escape back toward Earth, shield everyone from radiation that would kill them in days, generate power 5 times farther from the Sun than Earth, maintain perfect life support for a decade, then survive a re-entry more violent than anything humans have ever attempted. The mass requirements alone are staggering. Current estimates suggest a crewed Mars mission might require launching somewhere between 800 and 1,200 tons into low Earth orbit, and that's for a much shorter journey to a much closer destination. A Jupiter mission would likely require several times that mass. You're talking about something that would dwarf the International Space Station, which took over a decade and dozens of launches to assemble in orbit. But here's where it gets interesting. You probably wouldn't build this spacecraft on Earth at all. The tyranny of the rocket equation makes launching that much mass from Earth's surface essentially impossible with chemical rockets. Instead, you'd need to build the ship in orbit, possibly at a lunar gateway station or even on the Moon itself. Lunar resources could provide radiation shielding material. Water ice from the lunar poles could be split into hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel. The Moon's lower gravity makes launching components into space vastly easier than from Earth. This isn't science fiction anymore. NASA's Artemis program is explicitly designed to establish the infrastructure that would make this kind of construction possible. The Gateway Station orbiting the Moon could serve as a staging ground. Lunar mining operations could provide raw materials. Manufacturing facilities in low gravity could assemble components that would be impossible to build on Earth. But even with orbital construction, the propulsion system remains brutally challenging. Chemical rockets simply don't have the efficiency needed for a Jupiter round trip. The specific impulse, a measure of how efficiently a rocket uses fuel, isn't high enough. You'd need so much propellant that the spacecraft becomes impossibly large. This is why every serious proposal for crewed Jupiter missions involves either nuclear propulsion or some form of advanced electric drive. Nuclear thermal rockets heat hydrogen to extreme temperatures using a nuclear reactor, then expel it at high velocity. They can achieve specific impulses roughly twice that of chemical rockets, which sounds modest until you realize that this doubling effectively squares the performance improvement due to the rocket equation. A nuclear thermal system that NASA tested in the 1960s, called NERVA, demonstrated the basic feasibility of this approach. It worked. The technology exists. The problem isn't whether we can build nuclear thermal rockets. It's whether we can build ones powerful enough for a crewed Jupiter mission while managing the political and safety concerns of launching nuclear reactors into space. Electric propulsion systems like ion drives offer even higher efficiency, but their thrust is measured in fractions of a newton. They can run for years, gradually accumulating velocity, but they can't produce the rapid acceleration changes needed for some mission maneuvers. You'd probably need a hybrid approach: electric drives for the long cruise phases, nuclear thermal or chemical rockets for orbital insertions and major trajectory changes. Now imagine you've solved propulsion. You've got a spacecraft that can make the trip. What does the crew habitat look like? It needs to be far larger than anything we've built for space missions before. The psychological effects of confinement become critical on missions lasting years. Studies of Antarctic research stations and submarine crews suggest you need a minimum volume per person to maintain mental health. For a decade-long mission, you're probably looking at something like 50 to 100 cubic meters per crew member, not counting common areas, life support systems, and working spaces. The habitat also needs to provide radiation protection, which means mass. Lots of mass. water makes an excellent radiation shield, so some designs propose surrounding the crew quarters with water tanks. This serves double duty: radiation protection and water storage. But you're still talking about tons of shielding material that needs to be launched into space and integrated into the spacecraft structure. Then there's artificial gravity. 10 years in microgravity would leave the crew physically unable to function when they reach Jupiter, let alone when they return to Earth. Their bones would be brittle, their muscles atrophied, their cardiovascular systems deconditioned. Even with the most aggressive exercise regimens we've developed for the ISS, astronauts lose bone density at about 1 to 2% per month in critical areas like the hips and spine. The only real solution is artificial gravity through rotation. You spin the spacecraft, creating centrifugal force that mimics gravity. But this introduces its own engineering challenges. The spacecraft needs to be large enough that the rotation doesn't cause severe Coriolis effects that would make crew members constantly nauseous. You need a rotating section and a non-rotating section for certain equipment. The bearings and mechanisms that allow this rotation need to function flawlessly for a decade. Some designs propose a dumbbell configuration, 2 habitats connected by a tether, rotating around their common center of mass. This maximizes the radius for a given mass. Others suggest a rotating ring or cylinder. Each approach has trade-offs in complexity, reliability, and structural requirements. Let's talk about life support, because this is where the mission becomes truly unforgiving. On the ISS, astronauts recycle about 90% of their water. That's impressive. But over 10 years, even 10% losses add up to masses you can't afford to launch. You need near-perfect recycling. Every molecule of water, every breath of oxygen needs to be recovered and reused with almost 100% efficiency. Current ISS systems use a combination of filtration, distillation, and chemical processes to purify water. Oxygen is extracted from water through electrolysis. Carbon dioxide is removed from the air, and the carbon can be combined with hydrogen to produce water and methane. The methane is currently vented overboard on the ISS, but a Jupiter mission couldn't afford that waste. You'd need to either store it or find ways to break it down and recover the hydrogen. These systems are complex and require maintenance. Parts wear out, filters need replacing, and you can't exactly order replacements from Amazon when you are 2 years from Earth. The spacecraft would need to carry spare parts for every component that might fail, plus manufacturing capabilities to produce certain parts in flight using 3D printing or other techniques. Food presents its own challenge. A crew of 6 consuming 2,500 calories per day for 10 years needs roughly 20 tons of food. You can reduce this by growing some food on board, but that requires space, water, nutrients, and power for lighting. Some proposals suggest hybrid systems, carrying enough shelf-stable food for the entire mission while supplementing with fresh vegetables and herbs grown in compact hydroponic systems. But what about the crew themselves? Who do you send on a mission like this? You need people who are not just physically healthy but psychologically resilient in ways we've never had to test. Submarine crews serve tours of a few months. Antarctic researchers typically stay for a year. with the option to leave in emergencies. A Jupiter crew would be committed for a decade with absolutely no possibility of return. If something went wrong early in the mission, the selection process would be unlike anything NASA has done before. You're not just looking for technical skills, though those matter. You need people who can maintain their mental health in isolation, who can resolve conflicts constructively when there's nowhere to escape to, who can maintain motivation and focus when the mission drags on year after year. Some psychologists have suggested that the crew dynamics might be more important than individual resilience. The wrong combination of personalities could doom the mission, even if each individual seems perfectly qualified. The right team might overcome challenges that would break a group of individually talented but incompatible people. Then there's the medical situation, which deserves its own category of nightmare scenarios. What happens if someone has a medical emergency 3 years into the mission? There's no medevac option, no hospital. The crew would need a doctor or medic with surgical capabilities and a medical bay equipped to handle everything from appendicitis to broken bones to dental emergencies. The spacecraft would essentially need a small hospital, complete with diagnostic equipment, surgical tools, medications, and the ability to manufacture drugs that might degrade during the long mission. Some medical situations would be mission-ending. A severe illness or injury might force the mission to abort, if aborting is even possible at that point in the trajectory. The psychological impact of a crew member dying during the mission would be devastating and could compromise the mental health of the remaining crew. And we haven't even discussed what happens when you actually get to Jupiter. The science missions alone would demand months of work. You've spent 5 years getting there. You're not going to snap a few photos and leave. You need to study Jupiter's atmosphere, its magnetic field, the radiation belts that nearly killed your electronics on the way in. You need to visit the moons, Europa with its subsurface ocean, Ganymede with its own magnetic field, Io with its volcanic hellscape. Each moon requires careful orbital mechanics to reach, and each visit exposes you to different radiation levels. Europa is particularly interesting and particularly dangerous. The moon sits deep within Jupiter's radiation belts, receiving about 5.4 sieverts per day if you're unshielded. That's enough to cause radiation sickness within hours. Your spacecraft needs heavy shielding, but shielding adds mass, and mass means fuel, and fuel means more mass. It's that rocket equation again, following you everywhere. The time spent at Jupiter compounds every risk. More time means more radiation exposure. Even with shielding, more time means more opportunity for systems to fail. More time means depleting your consumables faster. And yet, you can't just rush through. This is a once-in-a-lifetime mission, maybe a once-in-a-century mission. The scientific return needs to justify the enormous cost and risk. But eventually, you have to leave. And that's where things get really interesting. The return trajectory presents problems that don't exist on the outbound journey. When you left Earth, you had time to build up speed gradually, using gravity assists from Venus, Earth again, maybe Mars. But leaving Jupiter? You're already deep in its gravity well. You need enough velocity to escape that well and begin the long fall back toward the inner solar system. The delta V required is staggering. Estimates suggest you need about 9 kilometers per second just to escape Jupiter's immediate gravitational influence. For comparison, that's roughly the same velocity needed to reach orbit from Earth's surface. You're essentially launching from a planet again, except your launch pad is a spacecraft that's already been in space for 5 years. Where does that velocity come from? You have options, none of them great. You could carry enough fuel to burn your way out, but remember, you've already spent most of your fuel getting to Jupiter and maneuvering around it. The fuel you'd need for the return journey would have to be carried from Earth, and carrying fuel requires carrying more fuel to carry that fuel. The math spirals quickly into impossibility. Gravity assists offer a way out, but they're tricky at Jupiter. You could use the moons to slingshot yourself into a higher energy orbit, stealing a bit of momentum from each moon you pass. Ganymede is massive enough to provide a decent boost, but timing these assists is crucial. Miss your window, and you might wait months for the next opportunity. And each assist requires precision navigation through those radiation belts. Some mission concepts propose using Jupiter itself for a gravity assist on the way out, diving close to the planet to pick up speed before heading sunward. But Jupiter's radiation near the planet itself is even more intense than at the moons. You'd need to make that pass quickly and hope your electronics survive the punishment. Then there's the propulsion system itself. Whatever engine brought you to Jupiter has been sitting in space for 5 years, exposed to radiation, thermal cycling, and vacuum. Will it work when you need it? The fuel has been stored at cryogenic temperatures for half a decade. Has any of it boiled off? Have the tanks maintained their integrity? You won't know until you try to light the engine, and by then it's too late to fix problems. The burn to leave Jupiter would take hours, not seconds like launching a satellite. Hours of continuous thrust while your navigation system calculates trajectory corrections in real time. Any malfunction during this burn could leave you stranded in an elliptical orbit that doesn't quite reach escape velocity. You'd fall back toward Jupiter and have to try again, if you have fuel left for another attempt. Assuming the burn succeeds, you're now on a trajectory back toward Earth. But you're not done with Jupiter's influence yet. The magnetosphere extends millions of kilometers beyond the planet. You're still bathing in radiation as you slowly climb out of the gravity well. The exposure continues for days, maybe weeks, depending on your escape trajectory. The spacecraft's orientation matters during this phase. Solar panels need to face the sun to generate power, but you also want your shielded side facing Jupiter to minimize radiation exposure. Communication antennas need to point at Earth. Heat radiators need to face cold space. It's a constant balancing act, and you can't afford to get it wrong. Communication becomes critical now. At Jupiter's distance, radio signals take about 43 minutes to reach Earth. That's 43 minutes each way, meaning any message you send takes an hour and a half for a round-trip response. If something goes wrong during the escape burn, you're on your own. Mission Control can't help you. They won't even know you're in trouble until it's too late to advise. Once you're truly free of Jupiter, the return journey begins. And here's something most people don't realize. The trip back takes just as long as the trip out. You're traveling from Jupiter to Earth, covering the same distance, fighting against the sun's gravity this time instead of falling toward it. 5 more years in space. 5 years of microgravity continuing to destroy your bones and muscles. 5 years of radiation exposure. Less than near Jupiter, but it never stops. Cosmic rays, solar radiation, they're always there. 5 years of isolation from Earth, watching it grow slowly larger through the window, knowing that any problem now leaves you dead in the void with no rescue possible. The spacecraft continues aging. Systems that survived the outbound journey and the Jupiter operations now have to last 5 more years. Redundancy helps, but only if you planned for it. The space shuttle flew missions measured in weeks and still had failures. The ISS requires regular maintenance and replacement parts brought up from Earth. Your Jupiter spacecraft has to function for a decade without resupply. Software becomes a concern. Modern spacecraft run millions of lines of code. Bugs that weren't apparent in the first 5 years might emerge in the second 5. Cosmic rays can flip bits in memory, corrupting data or causing unexpected behavior. The onboard computers need to constantly check and correct these errors. But the error correction systems themselves can fail. The crew's psychological state deteriorates further. The return journey lacks the excitement of approaching Jupiter. There's no new destination to anticipate, just the slow crawl back toward home. Some researchers worry that the psychological low point comes during the return, when the achievement of reaching Jupiter is behind you, but Earth is still years away. Depression, interpersonal conflicts, and motivation problems could peak during this phase. Food variety becomes a serious issue. Even with the best mission planning, you're eating the same limited menu for years. Taste buds change in space. Many astronauts report that food tastes different in microgravity. What tasted fine in year 1 might be barely edible by year 7. Some crews on submarines have reported that food monotony affects morale more than any other factor. The spacecraft's trajectory requires periodic corrections. You can't just point at Earth and coast. Gravitational perturbations from other planets, solar wind effects, even the pressure of sunlight on your solar panels, all these factors add up over 5 years. You need to make small burns periodically to stay on course. Each burn uses fuel, and fuel is finite. As you approach the inner solar system, heat becomes a problem. Near Jupiter, you are dealing with cold and low solar power. Now, the sun grows brighter and hotter each day. Thermal management systems need to dump excess heat. Radiators that were barely adequate at Jupiter might be overwhelmed at Earth's distance. The spacecraft's interior temperature rises, stressing systems that have already endured years of operation. Earth grows larger in the window. After 5 years of watching it as a blue star, it becomes a disk, then a marble, then finally starts to look like home. But you're approaching at enormous speed. Interplanetary trajectories don't end gently. You're going to hit Earth's atmosphere at velocities that would make a meteor jealous. Re-entry planning begins months before arrival. Where do you aim? What angle of approach? Too steep and you burn up. Too shallow and you skip off the atmosphere back into space. The Apollo capsules re-entered at about 11 kilometers per second. You're coming back from Jupiter. Your velocity is higher, much higher. Aerobraking might help. You could make multiple passes through the upper atmosphere, using drag to slow down gradually, rather than trying to shed all your velocity in one fiery plunge. But each pass heats the spacecraft. The heat shield degrades with every entry. You need to balance the number of passes against heat shield erosion. The heat shield itself is probably the most critical component for return. It needs to survive 5 years in space, enduring thermal cycling, radiation, and micrometeorite impacts, and then protect you during re-entry. Any damage to the heat shield is potentially fatal. The Columbia disaster showed what happens when thermal protection fails. As you approach Earth, communication finally becomes useful again. The light speed delay drops from 43 minutes to seconds. Mission control can provide real-time guidance. Weather monitoring becomes crucial. You can't land in a storm. Backup landing sites need to be prepared. Recovery teams need to be positioned. The final approach is automatic. No human pilot has the reflexes to handle re-entry from interplanetary space. The computer controls everything, making thousands of adjustments per second to maintain the correct angle and orientation. The crew is essentially cargo at this point, strapped in and hoping the engineers back on Earth got the math right. Re-entry begins at about 120 kilometers altitude. The spacecraft hits the atmosphere at perhaps 14 or 15 kilometers per second. The air compresses ahead of the heat shield, creating a plasma sheath that glows white hot. Temperatures exceed 3,000 degrees Celsius. The deceleration forces build. 3 Gs, 4 Gs, 5. After 5 years in microgravity, even 3 Gs feels crushing. The plasma blackout begins. Radio communication cuts off as ionized air blocks signals. For several minutes, mission control loses contact. The spacecraft is on its own, following pre-programmed guidance. If anything goes wrong now, no one can help. No one even knows there's a problem until the spacecraft either emerges from blackout or doesn't. Assuming you survive, and that's not guaranteed, you eventually slow enough for parachutes. These parachutes have been packed for over a decade. Have the materials degraded? Will they deploy properly? Previous missions have had parachute failures. The crew braces for the jolt as the chutes open, hoping the lines hold. The final descent takes perhaps 15 minutes. You're falling toward Earth after 10 years away, unable to walk, possibly unable to stand, your bones weakened and muscles atrophied. The ground approaches faster than seems safe. Impact comes as a shock, even though you knew it was coming. Then stillness, silence. The hatch remains closed while recovery teams approach. You've returned from Jupiter, but have you really made it back? The medical team is already on site. They've been tracking your descent for the last hour. The capsule sits motionless on the ground. Maybe a desert landing zone, maybe ocean recovery, depending on the trajectory. The exterior is scorched black, heat shield ablated away in places, parachute lines tangled around the structure. Sensors confirm life support is still functioning inside, but the hatch stays closed for now. Protocol dictates a 30-minute wait. The capsule needs to cool. Systems need to stabilize. And frankly, no one knows what they'll find when they open that door. You've been in space for 10 years. Your body has adapted to microgravity in ways that are only theoretically understood. The medical data transmitted during descent looked concerning. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure erratic, muscle tremors detected through the acceleration sensors. But you're alive. That's something. When they finally crack the seal, the air that escapes smells wrong, stale, recycled through filters for a decade, saturated with trace chemicals from outgassing materials, faint undertones of human habitation. The recovery team wears respirators, not because the air is toxic, but because it's alien. Your spacecraft became its own ecosystem over the years, and Earth's atmosphere feels harsh by comparison. You can't stand. This was expected. Astronauts returning from 6-month ISS missions often can't stand unassisted. You've been gone for 10 years. Your muscles have atrophied despite the exercise equipment. Your bones have lost density despite the supplements. Your cardiovascular system has forgotten how to pump blood against gravity. They lift you out on a stretcher, and even that gentle movement makes you nauseous. The sun is too bright. Your eyes have adapted to the controlled lighting inside the spacecraft. No day-night cycle, just artificial illumination calibrated to maintain circadian rhythms. Natural sunlight feels like a searchlight. The medical team shields your face, but you catch glimpses of blue sky. Real sky, not a viewport or a screen. The color seems impossibly vivid after years of looking at Jupiter's muted browns and tans. Earth's gravity crushes you. 1G, normal gravity. But it feels like 3. Your body has no muscle memory for this anymore. Every breath requires conscious effort. Your heart races trying to circulate blood through a system that's been reconfigured for weightlessness. The stretcher ride to the medical tent feels like being pressed under a weight. The initial examination reveals the extent of the damage. Bone density scans show losses of 30 to 40% in load-bearing bones. Your spine has actually lengthened. Without gravity compressing your vertebrae, you've grown taller. But the intervertebral discs are damaged from years of expansion. Back pain will be chronic, possibly permanent. Your muscles tell a similar story. Quadriceps and calf muscles have atrophied dramatically. The exercise equipment helped, but you can't fully simulate gravity's constant load. Muscle biopsies show changes at the cellular level. Fiber composition has shifted. Metabolism has altered. Whether these changes are reversible remains unknown. You're the first person to experience them at this scale. Vision problems are immediately apparent. Extended spaceflight causes fluid shifts that increase intracranial pressure. Your optic nerves are swollen. Visual acuity has decreased. Some astronauts never fully recover from this condition. The medical team photographs your retinas, documenting changes that might provide insights for future missions. You're a test case, a data point. The radiation exposure assessment takes longer. Dosimeters worn throughout the mission recorded cumulative doses, but the biological effects won't be fully known for years. Cancer risk is elevated. How much elevated? That depends on factors still being researched. Cataract formation is likely. Cognitive effects are possible. You signed consent forms acknowledging these risks before launch. But abstract possibilities feel different when they're your concrete future. Cardiovascular testing shows concerning adaptations. Your heart has actually shrunk slightly. Without gravity to fight against, it didn't need to maintain its original size. Blood volume has decreased. Orthostatic intolerance is severe. When they try to sit you up, your blood pressure drops dangerously. You nearly pass out. Standing is impossible for now, maybe for weeks. The psychological evaluation happens later, after the immediate medical crisis has stabilized. How do you feel? How was the journey? Are you experiencing any unusual thoughts or emotions? The questions feel inadequate. You've spent 10 years in a metal box with a handful of people. You've seen Jupiter's storms up close. You've experienced communication delays so long that conversations with Earth felt like writing letters. You've lived with the knowledge that no rescue was possible if something went wrong. But you're back. Damaged, yes. Changed, certainly. But alive. The survival rate for your mission was uncertain when you launched. Some analysts gave it 50-50 odds. Others were less optimistic. The fact that you're breathing Earth's atmosphere, even if it feels harsh and oxygen-rich compared to the carefully balanced mix in the spacecraft, represents a kind of victory. The rehabilitation timeline is measured in months, possibly years. Physical therapy will be intensive. Your bones need to rebuild density through weight-bearing exercise, but you can't walk yet. Your muscles need to regain mass and strength, but you can't support your own weight. It's a circular problem solved through gradual progression. Pull therapy first, where buoyancy reduces effective weight. Then parallel bars, where you can support yourself with your arms. Eventually, maybe, unassisted walking. Some things might never fully recover. Bone density typically plateaus below pre-flight levels. Muscle mass can be rebuilt, but the cellular changes might persist. Vision problems often prove permanent. The radiation exposure has rolled the dice on your long-term health. You'll be monitored for decades, watching for cancers that might or might not appear. But consider what you've accomplished. You traveled to Jupiter. You spent time in orbit around the largest planet in the solar system. You witnessed phenomena that no human had seen with their own eyes. You collected data that will advance scientific understanding for generations. And you came back. Most missions to Jupiter end in destruction. Galileo was deliberately crashed into Jupiter's atmosphere. Juno will eventually suffer the same fate. Spacecraft that venture to the outer solar system rarely return. The fuel requirements make it impractical. You defied those odds. The fact that your body paid a price doesn't diminish the achievement. It underscores the cost. The public reaction to your return is mixed. Some celebrate the successful completion of the mission. Others focus on the medical consequences, using your condition as evidence that crewed deep space missions are premature. The debate over human spaceflight versus robotic exploration intensifies. Your deteriorated physical state becomes a talking point for critics. Advocates counter that your scientific observations exceeded what robots could have achieved. You become a symbol for both sides. Interviews are scheduled, but you're not ready. Simple conversation exhausts you. The cognitive effects of long-duration spaceflight include decreased processing speed and attention deficits. Your brain, like your body, needs time to readapt to Earth's environment. The flood of sensory input, sounds, smells, sights, overwhelms systems that grew accustomed to the limited stimulus palette of a spacecraft interior. Your crew members, if others survive the journey, undergo similar rehabilitation. Some fare better than others. Individual variation in response to spaceflight is enormous. Genetic factors play a role. Age matters. Pre-existing conditions influence outcomes. The sample size is too small to draw definitive conclusions, but patterns emerge. Younger crew members generally recover faster. Those with higher bone density at mission retain more. Athletic individuals rebuild muscle more quickly. The psychological bond between crew members who shared this experience is unique. No one else can truly understand what you went through. The isolation, the danger, the constant low-level stress of knowing that any system failure could be fatal. The awe of seeing Jupiter's clouds roil beneath you. The strange beauty of the Galilean moons. The homesickness that became a chronic ache. You share a language that Earth-bound people can't speak. Mission debrief sessions continue for months. Every aspect of the journey gets documented. Technical performance, human factors, unexpected challenges, lessons learned. Your testimony informs the design of future missions. The life support failures you jury-rigged solutions for lead to engineering modifications. The psychological stresses you identified influence crew selection criteria. The medical consequences you're experiencing shape mission planning for subsequent deep space ventures. Because there will be subsequent missions. Your success, despite its costs, proves that humans can reach Jupiter and return. The fact that the return exacts a terrible price doesn't change the fundamental accomplishment. Explorers throughout history have paid similar costs. Some never made it back. You did. The long-term monitoring program will track you for the rest of your life. Annual physicals, ongoing assessments, regular check-ins with the mission medical team. You're a living laboratory, providing data on the effects of deep space radiation and extended microgravity exposure. Your health problems serve a purpose. They inform countermeasures for future missions. Every setback you experience might prevent similar problems for someone else, and you do it again. This surprises people. Despite the physical damage, despite the long recovery ahead, despite the permanent changes to your body and possibly your lifespan, you'd volunteer for another mission without hesitation. Because Jupiter isn't just a destination, it's a doorway, and you've walked through it. The difficulty of returning from Jupiter isn't just technical or physical, it's existential. You've traveled further from Earth than almost any human in history. You've seen things that change your perspective on humanity's place in the universe. You've experienced isolation that redefined your understanding of loneliness. You've faced dangers that made death feel closer than it ever had before. And then, you came back to a world that kept spinning without you. Reintegration proves harder than rehabilitation. Your body will eventually rebuild what it can. Your mind struggles more with readjustment. Earth feels crowded, noisy, fast-paced. Everyone complains about trivial problems, traffic, weather, minor inconveniences. You spent 10 years in a spacecraft where a failed seal meant death, where water was too precious to waste. where every resource was carefully rationed. Perspective shifts don't reverse easily, but you're home. The word feels strange. Is Earth still home after 10 years away? Does home mean the place where you started, or the place where you changed? Your spacecraft felt like home by the end, more familiar than Earth's gravity, more comfortable than Earth's chaos. Home might be a concept rather than a location. Or maybe home is something you left behind at Jupiter, orbiting in the radiation belts, waiting for the next explorer to arrive. The difficulty of returning from Jupiter, in the end, isn't measured in delta V or radiation exposure or bone density loss. It's measured in the gap between who you were when you left and who you became out there. Coming back alive is one thing. Coming back as yourself, that might be impossible. The technical challenges of returning from Jupiter don't end when you leave orbit. They multiply. Trajectory planning for the return journey involves calculations so complex they require months of computational time. Your spacecraft needs to escape Jupiter's gravity well while simultaneously positioning itself for the long coast back to Earth. This isn't like backing out of a driveway. Jupiter's gravitational influence extends millions of kilometers. Breaking free requires precise timing and enormous energy expenditure. The delta V budget for the return leg equals or exceeds what you spent reaching Jupiter. Delta V measures velocity change, how much speed you need to add or subtract through thrust. Escaping Jupiter's gravitational influence demands roughly 9 kilometers per second of velocity change. That's the same energy required to launch from Earth's surface into low orbit. You're essentially launching again, but this time from Jupiter's gravitational well instead of Earth's. Carrying enough propellant for this maneuver creates a cascade problem. More fuel means more mass. More mass requires more fuel to move. The rocket equation becomes tyrannical at these scales. Chemical propulsion alone makes crewed return missions nearly impossible without refueling, which nobody's figured out how to do at Jupiter. Mission planners propose gravity assists to reduce fuel requirements. Your spacecraft could swing past Jupiter's moons, stealing tiny amounts of their orbital momentum. Each flyby adds velocity without burning propellant. Ganymede, Callisto, Europa, they become stepping stones. But gravity assists demand precise navigation. Miss your aim point by a few kilometers, and you waste weeks or months correcting course. The navigation itself presents challenges Earth-based missions never face. Communication delay at Jupiter averages 45 minutes each way. Send a question to mission control. Wait 90 minutes for a response. Real-time guidance becomes impossible. Your spacecraft operates autonomously during critical maneuvers. The computers make split-second decisions while Earth waits helplessly for telemetry confirmation. Autonomous navigation systems must function flawlessly for years. No software updates can fix bugs discovered mid-mission. Upload times stretch across hours. Hardware failures can't be replaced. Redundancy becomes critical, tripling system mass and complexity. Then there's radiation damage accumulation during the return prep phase. While you orbit Jupiter conducting research, every electronic component absorbs punishment. The RAD 750 processor running your guidance computer tolerates up to 1 million rads. Sounds impressive until you realize Jupiter's radiation environment delivers that dose in weeks. Engineers designed Juno's systems to survive 8 orbits. Your mission requires months at Jupiter before departure. Shielding helps, but adds mass. Juno's titanium vault weighs 180 kilograms and protects only critical electronics. A crewed spacecraft needs shielding for habitable volumes measured in cubic meters, not liters. That shielding mass compounds the propulsion problem exponentially. The departure window timing proves crucial. Planetary alignment dictates when Earth and Jupiter occupy positions favorable for minimum energy trajectories. Miss your window and you wait months for the next opportunity. Months of additional radiation exposure, consumable depletion, system degradation. Launch windows for return occur roughly every 13 months when Earth and Jupiter align properly. But here's what mission profiles don't emphasize. The return journey takes longer than the outbound trip. You arrived at Jupiter with velocity built up from acceleration and possibly gravity assists from inner planets. Returning means fighting against the sun's gravitational influence that helped you outbound. Your spacecraft must climb back up the sun's gravity well. The trajectory becomes a calculated fall inward toward the sun, constantly adjusting to intersect Earth's orbit at precisely the moment Earth occupies that point in space. The mathematics involves solving 3-body problems with time-dependent variables. Computational models run thousands of iterations to find optimal solutions. Some mission concepts propose using Venus for a gravity assist on the return leg. Swing past Venus, steal some momentum, adjust your trajectory toward Earth. This reduces fuel requirements but extends mission duration by years. The Venus-Earth-Earth gravity assist sequence, called VEEGA, can work, but VEEGA trajectories require exact timing. Arrive at Venus early or late by even hours, and the mathematics falls apart. Nuclear propulsion offers theoretical advantages over chemical rockets. Higher specific impulse means more velocity change per kilogram of propellant. But nuclear engines introduce new complications: cooling systems, radiation from the reactor itself, political concerns about launching nuclear material from Earth. No nuclear propulsion system has flown beyond Earth orbit since the 1960s. Ion drives provide another option. They generate tiny amounts of thrust continuously over months or years, eventually building substantial velocity. The Dawn mission used ion propulsion to visit Vesta and Ceres, but ion drives require enormous power. Solar panels at Jupiter's distance generate only 4% of their Earth orbit output. You'd need arrays the size of football fields or nuclear reactors. Mission designers debate whether in situ resource utilization could enable refueling at Jupiter, perhaps mining water ice from Europa's surface, electrolyzing it into hydrogen and oxygen propellant. Sounds elegant until you calculate the infrastructure requirements. You'd need to land on Europa, establish mining operations, build processing facilities, and transfer propellant to orbit. Each step multiplies mission complexity and failure modes. The propulsion challenge connects directly to time. Longer missions mean extended radiation exposure, increased probability of system failures, more consumables required. Faster trajectories demand more fuel. The trade-offs form an optimization problem with no perfect solution. Your spacecraft begins the return burn sequence after months at Jupiter. The main engines ignite. Thrust builds gradually. These aren't the violent launches from Earth. Your engines burn for hours, slowly adding velocity. The spacecraft shudders. Years of dormant propulsion systems wake up and hopefully function as designed. Fuel management becomes critical. Engineers calculated your propellant budget down to kilograms. Burn too much, and you won't have enough for course corrections. Burn too little, and you stay trapped in Jupiter's influence. Telemetry monitors feed data to autonomous systems. Thrust vectors adjust continuously based on real-time performance measurements. Mid-course corrections occur periodically throughout the return journey. Small burns adjust trajectory as navigation updates refine your path. Each correction consumes propellant from dwindling reserves. Mission rules specify minimum fuel reserves that must remain for emergency maneuvers. Dip below those reserves and mission protocols trigger. The return trajectory stretches across years. You coast through the outer solar system, gradually falling toward the inner planets. Jupiter shrinks behind you. The sun grows brighter ahead. Your spacecraft becomes a tiny island of warmth and light in the cosmic void. Life support systems face their greatest test during this phase. Everything must function without maintenance beyond what the crew can perform. Water recycling, air revitalization, waste processing, all operate continuously for years. The International Space Station achieves 93% water recovery rates. Your mission requires even higher efficiency. Every lost kilogram of water that can't be recovered depletes irreplaceable reserves. Oxygen generation through electrolysis splits water molecules into breathable oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen gets vented or used as propellant. But electrolysis requires power. Your solar arrays generate decreasing power as radiation damage accumulates. Degradation models predicted this, but actual performance might vary. Power budgets have minimal margin for error. Carbon dioxide removal systems scrub exhaled CO2 from cabin atmosphere. Chemical scrubbers work reliably, but require replacement cartridges. Regenerable systems save mass, but need power. Everything connects. Power feeds life support. Life support sustains crew. Crew maintains systems. Break any link and the chain fails. Food supplies represent fixed mass launch from Earth, freeze-dried, vacuum-sealed, carefully calculated nutrition. A decade of meals occupies substantial volume, even with minimal packaging. You eat the same rotation of foods repeatedly. Variety disappeared years ago. Now you consume calories mechanically, fueling your body like adding propellant to tanks. Psychological factors intensify during the return. The excitement of reaching Jupiter has faded. The mission's purpose feels completed. What remains is survival, getting home. This phase tests mental endurance more than the outbound journey. At least traveling to Jupiter offered anticipation. Returning offers only waiting. Isolation deepens. Earth still appears as a distant point of light, weeks away at light speed for radio signals. Communication delays make conversations impossible. You send messages knowing responses arrive days later. The asynchronous nature creates emotional distance. You share experiences with people who won't hear about them for days. Crew dynamics shift during the return. Close quarters for years strain relationships. Minor irritations become major conflicts. Mission psychologists prepared you for this, but preparation differs from experience. you develop coping mechanisms, designated alone time, structured social interactions, conflict resolution protocols. Some work, others don't. Equipment failures occur with increasing frequency. Systems designed for 10-year service lives approach their limits. Components fail. Redundant backups activate. Crew repairs become routine. You joke that you're flying a spacecraft held together with improvisation and hope. The joke carries uncomfortable truth. Radiation effects accumulate. Shielding reduces exposure, but doesn't eliminate it. Galactic cosmic rays penetrate everything. High-energy particles create secondary radiation cascades inside the spacecraft. Your body accumulates dose steadily, silently. Medical monitoring tracks, biomarkers. Some measurements trend in concerning directions. The sun's solar cycle influences radiation exposure. During solar maximum, increased solar wind actually provides some shielding against galactic cosmic rays. During solar minimum, that protection diminishes. Your mission planners time departure to minimize exposure during solar minimum periods. But solar cycles don't follow exact schedules. Physical deconditioning continues despite exercise countermeasures. You spend hours daily on resistance equipment and cardiovascular machines. Artificial gravity through rotation could help but adds engineering complexity. Most designs omit, so you exercise, knowing it only slows inevitable deterioration. Your bones continue losing density. Calcium leaches into your bloodstream, increasing kidney stone risk. Muscle mass declines. Your heart adapts to pumping against no gravitational resistance, becoming less efficient for future Earth conditions. These changes will require extensive rehabilitation, if they're reversible at all. Vision changes progress. Intracranial pressure from fluid shifts affects optic nerves. Some astronauts develop permanent vision impairment after 6-month ISS missions. You've been in microgravity for years. Regular vision tests track deterioration. Glasses help for now, but the structural changes might be permanent. Sleep remains disrupted. Without Earth's day-night cycle, your circadian rhythm struggles. Artificial lighting schedules help somewhat, but your body knows something's wrong. Sleep quality suffers. You feel perpetually tired, operating in a fog of fatigue that never quite lifts. The return trajectory eventually brings you back into the inner solar system. Mars' orbit passes. Earth's orbit approaches. Your spacecraft aims for an intersection point calculated years earlier. Navigation updates refine the target. Course corrections adjust your path by meters per second, fine-tuning the trajectory. Communication delays shrink as you approach Earth. 45 minutes becomes 30, then 20, then 10. Mission control's messages arrive faster. The asynchronous conversation begins feeling almost real-time. This psychological shift lifts morale. Earth transforms from abstract concept to approaching destination. But approaching Earth introduces the final challenge: atmospheric entry at interplanetary velocity. Entry velocity determines survival. Your spacecraft approaches Earth at 12 to 14 kilometers per second. Apollo returned from the Moon at 11 kilometers per second. You're moving faster, significantly faster. Every additional kilometer per second increases heat shield requirements exponentially. The entry corridor represents a narrow window disaster scenarios. Too steep, atmospheric friction generates heat exceeding your shield's capacity. The spacecraft burns up. Too shallow, you skip off the atmosphere like a stone on water, bouncing back into space without enough propellant to attempt another approach. The corridor spans perhaps 1 degree of approach angle. Miss it by half a degree either direction, and you die. Mission planners calculated this trajectory years ago, but calculations assume perfect execution. Your spacecraft has endured years in the radiation environment around Jupiter, months navigating the inner solar system, and countless system degradations along the way. Navigation sensors might have drifted. Thrusters might provide slightly less force than specifications indicated. Guidance computers might contain radiation-induced errors in their calculations. You perform final trajectory corrections weeks before entry. Small burns adjust your approach angle by fractions of degrees. Navigation teams on Earth verify your path using ground-based tracking. Radio signals carrying correction commands take minutes to reach you. You implement burns, then wait for confirmation that adjustments achieved desired results. This iterative process continues until your trajectory falls within acceptable parameters. The heat shield represents your only protection against temperatures exceeding those on the sun's surface. During peak heating, plasma forms around the spacecraft, ionized gas glowing white hot. This plasma blocks radio communication for several minutes. Mission control loses contact. You're alone during the most dangerous phase of the entire mission. Heat shield design determines whether you survive. Engineers selected materials years ago based on predicted entry velocities and heating rates, but predictions contain uncertainties. Actual conditions might exceed design parameters. The shield consists of ablative material, compounds that vaporize in layers, carrying heat away from the spacecraft. This process works through controlled destruction. The shield sacrifices itself to protect you. Thickness matters critically. Too thin, the shield burns through before entry completes, exposing the spacecraft structure to plasma temperatures. Too thick, unnecessary mass reduces payload capacity or requires more propellant. Engineers calculated optimal thickness based on trajectory models, but models simplify reality. Entry begins at approximately 120 kilometers altitude. Atmospheric molecules start impacting the spacecraft. Initial heating remains manageable, but as altitude decreases, atmospheric density increases. More molecules mean more collisions. Heat flux rises rapidly. Deceleration forces build. Your body experiences multiple G-forces, Earth gravities, pressing you into your seat. After years in microgravity, this feels crushing. Your weakened cardiovascular system struggles to pump blood against gravitational forces. Vision narrows as blood drains from your head. You fight to remain conscious, knowing that loss of consciousness during entry could prove fatal if manual intervention becomes necessary. The spacecraft shudders. Atmospheric forces create vibrations that rattle every component. You hear roaring as air rushes past at hypersonic velocities. The noise intensifies, a freight train sound, then thunder, then something beyond any terrestrial comparison. Your seat shakes so violently you can't read instruments clearly. You trust that automated systems Maintain proper attitude. Peak heating occurs several minutes into entry. External temperatures reach 3000 degrees Celsius. The heat shield glows, visible through small windows as an intense orange radiance. You smell something burning, off-gassing from internal components, expanding in the heat. The spacecraft's interior temperature rises despite insulation. Cooling systems run at maximum capacity. Communication blackout begins. Radio signals can't penetrate the plasma sheath surrounding the spacecraft. Mission control's voices disappear mid-sentence. You knew this would happen. Training covered it extensively. But intellectual preparation differs from experiential reality. You're completely isolated, hurtling through the atmosphere in a fireball, with no way to call for help if something goes wrong. The entry profile follows a predetermined path. Your spacecraft doesn't descend straight down. Instead, it traces a long arc through the upper atmosphere, using aerodynamic forces to gradually reduce velocity. This extended entry reduces peak heating rates, but increases total heat exposure. Engineers chose this profile to balance competing constraints. Guidance system maintains attitude within narrow parameters. The spacecraft must present its heat shield toward the direction of motion. Deviation by more than a few degrees exposes unprotected surfaces to plasma temperatures. Attitude control thrusters fire constantly, making tiny corrections. Propellant consumption during entry represents a significant fraction of remaining reserves. Velocity decreases rapidly. Atmospheric drag converts kinetic energy into heat. Every second, you're moving slower, but slower remains hypersonic, multiple times the speed of sound. Shock waves form around the spacecraft, compressing air so suddenly it heats to incandescence. The G-forces vary throughout entry. Initial acceleration remains modest, perhaps 2 or 3 gravities. But as atmospheric density increases, deceleration intensifies. Peak forces might reach 6 to 8 gravities. Your vision tunnels further. Breathing becomes difficult. Every movement requires enormous effort. You focus on maintaining consciousness and monitoring critical systems. Heat shield performance determines mission success. Ablative material vaporizes as designed, creating a boundary layer of gas that insulates the spacecraft from direct plasma contact. But ablation rates depend on actual heating conditions. If conditions exceed predictions, the shield might ablate faster than expected, potentially exposing underlying structure before entry completes. Temperature sensors embedded in the shield provide data about thermal performance. You monitor these readings continuously during entry. Numbers climb steadily. 2000 degrees, 2500, 3000. The sensors reach their measurement limits and flatline. You're flying blind now, trusting that engineers included adequate safety margins. Plasma formation creates electromagnetic interference that affects more than just communications. Electrical systems experience noise. Instruments provide erratic readings. Backup systems remain on standby in case primary electronics fail. You've trained for manual control if necessary, but manual re-entry from interplanetary velocity exceeds human reaction time capabilities. You need the computers. The blackout period lasts several minutes. Each second feels extended. You count heartbeats, estimating time passage. Training included meditation techniques for high-stress situations. You employ them now, controlling breathing and maintaining mental focus despite physical discomfort and sensory assault. Radio contact returns abruptly, static resolves into voices. Mission control confirms they're receiving telemetry again. Your vital signs appear on their screens. They see what you feel: elevated heart rate, increased respiration, stress hormone markers in your blood. But you're alive. The spacecraft survived peak heating. Velocity continues decreasing. You're subsonic now, slower than sound. The roaring diminishes to mere thunder. G-forces reduce to tolerable levels. Your vision clears. You can move your arms again without feeling like they weigh 50 kilograms each. Drogue parachutes deploy at predetermined altitude and velocity. Small chutes first, stabilizing the spacecraft and reducing speed gradually. Then main chutes, massive canopies that blossom above you, jerking the spacecraft suddenly. After the sustained forces of entry, this deceleration feels gentle by comparison. You're falling now rather than flying. The spacecraft sways beneath the parachutes. Through windows, you see sky, blue sky. Not the black of space you've observed for years. Clouds drift past. The air looks thick, substantial. You've forgotten what atmosphere looks like from inside it. Altitude decreases steadily. Instruments show descent rate within normal parameters. Parachutes function correctly. Landing systems prepare for final touchdown. Depending on mission design, you might land on solid ground or splash down in ocean waters. Either way, impact approaches. Landing occurs with surprising force. Even with parachutes, the spacecraft hits hard enough to compress shock absorbers fully. Everything not secured flies momentarily. Then stillness. Complete stillness. After years of spacecraft vibration, thruster firings, and equipment noise, silence feels unnatural. You're on Earth. The mission succeeded. You survived entry. But sitting in your spacecraft, weakened from years in microgravity, you face another challenge, standing up under full gravity for the first time in nearly a decade. Recovery teams arrive within minutes for ocean landings, hours for remote ground sites. They approach cautiously. The spacecraft remains hot from entry, potentially dangerous. They verify atmospheric integrity first, ensuring no toxic propellant leaks or other hazards. Hatch opening introduces Earth's atmosphere to your nostrils. The smell overwhelms you. Plants, soil, salt water, scents you've only remembered for years. Even industrial odors from recovery vehicles smell rich and complex compared to the recycled, filtered air you've breathed since launch. Recovery personnel assist you from the spacecraft. Your legs can't support your weight. Muscle atrophy and bone loss make standing impossible. You collapse into their arms and they lower you onto a stretcher. This wasn't unexpected. Medical teams prepared for this, but the helplessness still shocks you. The sun feels intense against your skin. You've experienced solar radiation in space, but Earth's atmosphere filters it differently. Heat and light quality differ from what you remember. Everything seems brighter, warmer, more present than your memory suggested. Medical evaluation begins immediately. Doctors check vital signs, draw blood samples, perform neurological assessments. They document your physical condition for comparison against pre-flight baselines. The data will inform future mission planning. You're a test case, the first human to endure this duration in deep space and survive. Transport to medical facilities occurs quickly. You're loaded into aircraft or ships, then moved to specialized rehabilitation centers. The journey feels surreal. Earth's landscapes rush past windows. Trees, buildings, people going about ordinary lives, all strange after years seeing only spacecraft interiors and celestial bodies through telescopic cameras. Readaptation begins immediately, but proceeds gradually. Your body must relearn Earth gravity. Cardiovascular system must rebuild capacity to pump blood against gravitational forces. Muscles must strengthen. Bones must somehow restore lost density, though full restoration might prove impossible. Physical therapy starts gently. Initially, you can't walk. Therapists help you sit upright for brief periods. Even this exhausts you. Your heart races, vision dims. They lay you back down and wait for recovery. Over days and weeks, sitting duration extends, then standing with support. Eventually, walking with assistance. Balance proves challenging. Your vestibular system, inner ear structures that sense orientation, adapted to microgravity. Now it must readapt to gravity's constant downward pull. You feel dizzy standing still. Walking creates nausea. The room seems to spin randomly. This improves slowly, but some astronauts experience permanent balance deficits. Strength returns gradually. You perform resistance exercises, progressively increasing difficulty. Muscle mass rebuilds faster than bone density. Within months, you can walk independently. Within a year, you might approach pre-flight strength levels. But bone recovery takes years and might never complete fully. Radiation exposure consequences emerge over time. Medical monitoring tracks cancer markers, cardiovascular changes, and neurological function. Some effects appear immediately. Cataracts from radiation damage show up within years. Others develop decades later. You'll require medical surveillance for life. Psychological readjustment challenges might exceed physical rehabilitation. You've experienced something only a handful of humans ever have. You've traveled farther from Earth than any previous person. You've endured isolation, danger, and hardship beyond most human experience. Processing this proves difficult. Earth seems crowded after years with only a few crew members. Noise overwhelms you. Traffic, conversations, environmental sounds. You struggle in social situations, finding small talk meaningless after confronting cosmic-scale questions. Relationships strain. Some marriages fail. The person who returned differs from the person who left. You give interviews, write reports, brief mission planners. Your experiences inform future missions. Every system failure you documented, every workaround you invented, every unexpected challenge you faced becomes data points for engineering improvements. Future crews will benefit from your suffering, but was it worth it? You ask yourself this question repeatedly. The answer varies depending on the day, your mood, your physical condition. Sometimes, yes, unquestionably. You've expanded human knowledge, pushed boundaries, achieved something extraordinary. Other times, no. The cost seems too high. Your health, your relationships, years of your life spent in a metal tube hurtling through space. The question itself might be wrong. Worth implies a calculation, a weighing of costs against benefits. But some human endeavors transcend such accounting. Exploration happens because humans explore. We climb mountains, cross oceans, venture into space, not because calculations prove it worthwhile, but because something in our nature drives us outward, beyond known boundaries, toward distant horizons. Your body bears permanent marks from the journey. Bone density never fully recovers. Vision changes remain. Radiation damage accumulates in your DNA. But you've also gained something. You've seen Jupiter's clouds up close. You've witnessed auroras powered by magnetic fields strong enough to kill you. You've experienced total isolation, complete self-reliance, absolute commitment to mission and crew. Future missions will build on your foundation. Engineers will improve radiation shielding. Biologists will develop better countermeasures for microgravity effects. Psychologists will refine crew selection and support protocols. Each mission learns from previous ones. Each crew stands on the shoulders of those who went before. The difficulty of returning from Jupiter isn't just technical. It's biological, psychological, and existential. The journey changes you fundamentally. The person who arrives back isn't the person who left. Whether that transformation represents growth or damage remains an open question, one each returning astronaut must answer individually. The technical legacy of your mission extends far beyond personal experience. Engineers at space agencies worldwide analyze every data point your spacecraft transmitted. They study radiation exposure patterns, tracking how charged particles degraded specific components over time. Circuit boards that failed after 3 years of exposure inform new designs. Shielding configurations that protected critical systems become templates for future missions. Your spacecraft itself remains in Jupiter orbit, continuing to transmit telemetry until its systems finally fail. Engineers monitor this slow degradation carefully. Each component failure provides data. When did the redundant processors start showing errors? How long did backup systems function after primary systems failed? Which materials held up best against radiation bombardment? This information proves invaluable for designing missions intended to last even longer. The radiation vault that protected your electronics weighed nearly 200 kilograms. Future missions might use different materials, advanced composites, specialized polymers, layered shielding that provides better protection per kilogram. Your mission established baselines. Now engineers know minimum shielding requirements for human survival in Jupiter's magnetosphere. Life support data reveals surprising patterns. Your recycling systems functioned better than expected in some areas, worse in others. The water recovery system exceeded design specifications, maintaining 98% efficiency throughout the mission. But the oxygen generation system showed gradual degradation, requiring increase in maintenance interventions. Carbon dioxide scrubbers needed replacement more frequently than predicted. These findings drive technological development. Chemical engineers design improved scrubber materials. Mechanical engineers create more reliable electrolysis systems. Biologists explore closed-loop ecosystems that might supplement mechanical systems. Algae tanks that convert carbon dioxide to oxygen, producing edible biomass simultaneously. Your medical data becomes particularly valuable. Bone density scans taken before launch, during the mission, and after return reveal precise patterns of calcium loss and recovery. Muscle biopsies show which fibers degraded fastest and which exercise protocols proved most effective at preserving strength. Cardiovascular monitoring demonstrates how heart function changed across different mission phases. Radiation dosimetry provides concerning insights. Your cumulative exposure exceeded predictions by nearly 30%. Most of this came during the outbound journey through Jupiter's radiation belts. The return transit, using a different trajectory, resulted in lower exposure. Mission planners adjust future trajectories accordingly, accepting longer flight times in exchange for reduced radiation risk. Psychological evaluations add another dimension. Your crew maintained cohesion remarkably well, but stress markers appeared at predictable intervals. Communication delays proved more psychologically challenging than anticipated. Not being able to consult Earth for urgent decisions created persistent anxiety. Crew dynamics shifted when one member became ill. The realization that no outside help could arrive fundamentally changed how everyone interacted. These psychological insights inform crew selection for future missions. Psychologists develop better screening tools, identifying personality traits that correlate with long-duration mission success. They create improved support protocols, virtual reality environments, providing psychological respite, AI companions offering someone to talk to without judgment, structured activities maintaining routine and purpose. But data alone doesn't capture everything your mission revealed. Some lessons resist quantification. You learned that humans can endure extraordinary hardship when committed to meaningful goals. You discovered reserves of patience, resilience, and determination you didn't know you possessed. You experienced the profound satisfaction of accomplishing something genuinely difficult. Your mission also exposed limitations. Current technology remains barely adequate for Jupiter missions. Everything functions at the edge of capability. Radiation shielding provides minimal protection. Life support systems operate with little margin for error. Propulsion efficiency limits mission architectures. Communication delays prevent real-time collaboration with Earth. Future missions require technological breakthroughs, not incremental improvements. Nuclear propulsion could reduce transit times, decreasing radiation exposure and psychological strain. Advanced materials might provide better radiation protection at lower mass. Artificial gravity through rotating habitats could prevent bone loss and muscle atrophy. Closed-loop biological systems could reduce dependence on consumables carried from Earth. Some proposed technologies border on science fiction. Magnetic field generators might deflect charged particles, creating artificial magnetospheres around spacecraft. Hibernation systems could place crew in metabolic stasis, reducing consumable requirements and psychological stress. Advanced medical interventions might repair radiation damage in real time, preventing cumulative effects. Your mission proves these technologies necessary, not optional. Sending humans to Jupiter without them means accepting casualties. Crews will suffer permanent health damage. Some might not survive the journey. These outcomes remain unacceptable to mission planners, ethical committees, and the public. The economic challenges prove equally daunting. Your mission cost exceeded $50 billion. Most of this went to development, designing systems, testing components, building redundancy into every subsystem. Launch costs added billions more. Mission operations during the decade-long journey required constant staffing, ground support, and infrastructure maintenance. Future missions face similar costs, unless fundamental changes occur. Reusable launch vehicles reduce Earth departure expenses. In-orbit assembly of large spacecraft becomes economically feasible. Fuel depots, positioned throughout the solar system, enable staged journeys, reducing the mass any single launch must carry. Automation decreases the human workforce required for mission operations. But perhaps the most significant barrier isn't technical or economic, it's philosophical. Why send humans to Jupiter at all? Robotic missions accomplish scientific objectives at a fraction of the cost and risk. Machines don't suffer radiation sickness. They don't require life support. They don't experience psychological strain from isolation. They don't need to return. The argument for human exploration rests on capabilities machines lack. Humans adapt to unexpected situations, making intuitive leaps that programmed responses can't match. Humans ask questions machines wouldn't think to pose. Humans experience wonder, curiosity, and the drive to understand that motivates exploration beyond practical objectives. Your mission embodied this philosophical position. You didn't just collect data, you experienced Jupiter. You witnessed cloud formations with human eyes, processed observations through human consciousness, felt the significance of standing at the edge of the solar system's largest planet. This subjective experience carries value beyond scientific return. Critics dismiss this as romantic nonsense. They argue that streaming high-definition video provides equivalent experience without risking lives. They point out that remote-controlled telepresence robots could explore Jupiter's moons more effectively than suited astronauts. They question whether subjective human experience justifies billions of dollars and years of effort. These debates continue in academic journals, congressional hearings, and public forums. Your mission provides ammunition for both sides. Supporters highlight your achievements, the problems you solved that automated systems couldn't have addressed, the inspiration your journey provided. Opponents emphasize the cost, the health consequences you suffered, the limited scientific return compared to robotic alternatives. The truth likely lies between extremes. Some missions benefit from human presence, others don't. Mars exploration probably requires humans eventually. The communication delay prevents real-time remote operation, and the complexity of establishing permanent settlements exceeds current robotic capabilities. But Jupiter? The case remains less clear. Your perspective has shifted since returning. During the mission, you never questioned the endeavor's value. You were too busy surviving, operating systems, conducting experiments. Purpose seemed self-evident. You were there, doing something unprecedented, pushing boundaries. Doubt seemed like weakness. But recovery provides time for reflection. Was it worth it? You've sacrificed health, years, relationships. You've gained experience, knowledge, accomplishment. The ledger doesn't balance easily. Some costs can't be measured against benefits. Some experiences transcend cost-benefit analysis. You attend conferences where scientists present findings derived from your mission data. They describe Jupiter's magnetic field structure with unprecedented detail. They explain atmospheric dynamics revealed by your observations. They theorize about the processes generating auroras, more powerful than anything on Earth. Your contributions enable this knowledge. You also meet with engineers designing the next generation of spacecraft. They show you improved radiation shielding, asking questions about your experience passing through Jupiter's magnetosphere. They demonstrate advanced life support prototypes, incorporating lessons from your mission's challenges. They present propulsion concepts that might reduce transit times by years. Your suffering informs their work. These interactions provide satisfaction, but also frustration. The problems you identified required decades to solve. The next crewed Jupiter mission won't launch for 20 years minimum, perhaps longer. The technologies needed don't exist yet. The funding remains uncertain. Public interest has already begun fading. Your return generated headlines, but attention drifts toward newer concerns. This pattern repeats throughout exploration history. Columbus's voyages opened Atlantic crossings, but decades passed before sustained colonization. Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic in 1927, but commercial aviation took years to develop. Apollo astronauts reached the moon in 1969, but no human has returned since 1972. Your Jupiter mission might represent a similar historical moment, an achievement that demonstrates possibility without guaranteeing follow-through. The uncertainty troubles you. Did you suffer for nothing? Will your mission remain an isolated accomplishment, impressive but not transformative? Or will it catalyze developments you can't yet perceive, influencing space exploration's trajectory in ways that only become apparent decades hence? These questions lack immediate answers. History's judgment comes slowly. The Apollo program seemed like humanity's permanent expansion into space, but became instead a temporary achievement. Conversely, early aviation pioneers couldn't foresee modern air travel's ubiquity. Your mission's ultimate significance remains unknown. What you do know, returning from Jupiter represents the hardest thing humans have accomplished. The technical challenges exceeded anything previous space missions faced. The physical demands pushed human physiology to breaking points. The psychological strain tested mental resilience in unprecedented ways. You survived this through skill, determination, and considerable luck. Future missions will be easier. Technology improves, experience accumulates, lessons learned reduce uncertainty. But Jupiter missions will never be routine. The distance, the radiation, the isolation, these fundamental challenges persist regardless of technological advancement. Going to Jupiter and returning remains an extraordinary undertaking, reserved for the most capable humans and the most advanced technology civilization can muster. Your body bears permanent scars from the journey. Your mind carries memories that wake you some nights. The moment you realized Earth was just a blue dot, impossibly far away. The day a critical system failed and you spent 18 hours repairing it, knowing failure meant death. The slow passage of time during the return journey, counting down months, then weeks, then finally days until home. But you also carry something else. Pride, yes, but more than that. Satisfaction that you accomplished something genuinely difficult. Gratitude for experiencing perspectives few humans ever will. Appreciation for Earth, its atmosphere, its gravity, its abundance, that only comes from leaving it completely behind. And perhaps most importantly, You possess knowledge that transcends personal experience. You understand viscerally what most people only grasp intellectually: Earth's fragility, isolation, preciousness. From Jupiter's distance, Earth appears as a pale blue dot, barely visible against the cosmic darkness. That perspective changes you permanently. During public appearances, people ask about the hardest moments. You describe technical challenges, radiation exposure calculations, life support failures, navigation corrections. These answers satisfy curiosity, but miss deeper truths. The hardest part wasn't any single crisis, but rather the accumulated weight of separation, the relentless awareness that survival depended on systems functioning perfectly for years without respite. Children ask different questions. They want to know about daily life, what you ate, how you slept, whether space smells. These inquiries seem trivial, but address fundamental concerns about humanity's space future. If people can't imagine living beyond Earth, they won't support missions enabling it. Your descriptions of recycled water, exercise regimens, and entertainment options make space exploration tangible rather than abstract. Scientists probe technical details with professional intensity. They want telemetry data, equipment performance metrics, physiological measurements. Your body became an experimental platform, generating information about human adaptation to extreme environments. Blood samples, bone density scans, cognitive assessments all contribute to understanding necessary for future missions. This medical data might prove your journey's most valuable legacy, informing spacecraft design and crew selection. For decades, engineers focus on failures. Every malfunction, every unexpected behavior, every deviation from predicted performance teaches lessons applicable to future systems. The radiation shielding performed differently than models suggested. Life support recycling achieved lower efficiency than anticipated. Communication delays created operational challenges not fully appreciated during planning. These insights, purchased through your suffering, prevent future crews from encountering identical problems. The psychological community wants to understand isolation's mental effects. You underwent extensive debriefing, describing emotional states throughout the mission. The initial excitement giving way to routine, then boredom, then occasional despair. The techniques that helped, structured schedules, communication with Earth, creative pursuits. The factors that didn't, platitudes about importance, reminders of public attention, abstract appeals to exploration's nobility. Sure, what helped most was purpose clarity. You weren't enduring hardship for abstract reasons, but rather accomplishing specific objectives, scientific measurements, engineering demonstrations, pathway creation for future missions. When despair threatened, focusing on immediate tasks provided psychological anchor. The next experiment, the next maintenance procedure, the next communication window. These concrete goals sustained you when larger purposes felt overwhelming. Some missions fail spectacularly, generating public attention and investigation. Others succeed, but reveal uncomfortable truths about costs versus benefits. Your mission succeeded technically. All primary objectives achieved, safe return accomplished, but exposed Jupiter exploration's brutal realities. The radiation damage you sustained, the bone density you lost, the psychological strain you experienced. These outcomes weren't failures, but rather accurate measurements of what Jupiter missions demand. Future missions might reduce these costs through better technology. Advanced propulsion systems could shorten transit times, decreasing radiation exposure and microgravity duration. Improved shielding might provide better protection. Enhanced life support could reduce psychological strain through better food, more comfortable quarters, superior entertainment options. But fundamental challenges persist: distance, isolation, radiation intensity. Technology mitigates, but doesn't eliminate these obstacles. Some advocate robotic exploration instead, arguing human missions cost too much while providing marginal additional benefit. Robots don't require life support, tolerate radiation better, and operate without psychological concerns. This argument has merit, but misses crucial points. Humans adapt to unexpected situations in ways robots cannot. Human judgment handles ambiguity better than programmed responses, and human presence generates public engagement that robotic missions rarely achieve. Your mission's public impact exceeded expectations. Millions followed your journey through social media, news coverage, documentary films. Children drew pictures of your spacecraft. Teachers used your mission for educational units. Politicians referenced your accomplishment in speeches about national achievement. This attention translated into sustained space program funding, enabling missions that might otherwise have been cancelled. But attention fades. Within 2 years of your return, public interest declined substantially. New crises emerged: economic downturns, political conflicts, environmental disasters. Space exploration receded into background awareness, important but not urgent. This pattern reflects human nature more than space exploration's actual significance. Immediate concerns dominate attention, regardless of long-term importance. The space agency continues planning future Jupiter missions despite reduced public enthusiasm. Your mission proved crewed Jupiter exploration possible, answering a fundamental feasibility question. Now, engineers focus on making it practical, reducing costs, improving safety, developing technologies, enabling sustainable presence, rather than heroic one-off achievements. Some proposals involve establishing infrastructure incrementally. First, automated supply missions, pre-positioning resources at Jupiter. Then, crewed missions utilizing these caches rather than carrying everything from Earth. Eventually, perhaps, permanent stations orbiting Jupiter or its moons, supporting ongoing research and resource utilization. These visions require decades and enormous investment, but your mission demonstrated the first necessary step. You sometimes wonder whether you'd do it again, knowing what you now know about the costs. The honest answer varies depending on when you're asked. Immediately after return, exhausted and damaged, you would have refused. Now, years later, with perspective restored, you feel differently. The experience, despite its difficulty, provided meaning transcending ordinary accomplishment. You did something genuinely hard, pushing human capabilities' boundaries. That satisfaction sustains you during difficult moments, when arthritis flares in joints damaged by calcium loss, when routine medical scans reveal radiation-induced concerns, when nightmares replay mission crises with dream logic intensity. You paid a price, but willingly and with full knowledge. Many people sacrifice health for lesser purposes. You did it for something genuinely significant. Your family relationships changed permanently. Your spouse aged 3 years during your decade away. A small discrepancy, but emotionally significant. Your children grew up largely without you, forming attachments and patterns excluding you. Reintegration required patience and effort from everyone. Some relationships never fully recovered. Others strengthened through adversity. Family life continues, but differently than before. Friends divided into categories based on their response to your mission. Some maintained regular communication throughout, their messages providing vital psychological support. Others drifted away, unable to relate to your experience or uncomfortable with the attention you received. New friendships formed with people who understood, other astronauts, scientists, engineers working on space programs. These relationships carry depth ordinary friendships rarely achieve. You've become a historical figure, your name appearing in textbooks alongside previous exploration pioneers. This recognition feels strange. You remain the same person who signed up for the mission, motivated by curiosity and ambition rather than historical legacy. But perspective shifts with time. What felt like personal adventure becomes historical event. Your subjective experience becomes objective data point in humanity's expansion beyond Earth. Historians will debate your mission's significance for generations. Some will argue it represented a crucial breakthrough, proving human space exploration's viability beyond Mars. Others will consider it an expensive stunt, impressive but not transformative. The truth probably lies between extremes. Your mission was significant but not revolutionary, advancing human capability without fundamentally changing civilization's trajectory. What matters more than historical judgment? You accomplished something genuinely difficult, expanding human knowledge and capability in the process. The measurements you collected, the systems you tested, the experiences you documented, all contribute to understanding necessary for humanity's space future. Whether that future involves regular Jupiter missions or takes different directions, your contribution remains. The hardest part of returning from Jupiter wasn't the radiation, the isolation, or the physical degradation. It was coming home and discovering that Earth, despite its familiarity, no longer felt entirely like home. You've seen too much, experienced too much, changed too much. Part of you remains out there, orbiting Jupiter, watching Earth shrink to invisibility. That part never fully returned, and you've accepted it never will. You carry Jupiter with you, not as trauma, but as permanent perspective shift. Every complaint about minor inconveniences seems absurd compared to what you endured. Every appreciation for simple pleasures, fresh air, natural light, unlimited water, feels profound in ways others can't comprehend. You exist between worlds now, neither fully of Earth nor of space, but occupying strange territory between them. This liminal existence brings unexpected gifts. You perceive patterns others miss, connections between apparently disparate phenomena. You're time-managing complex systems under extreme stress, developed intuitions about problem-solving that apply surprisingly broadly. Organizations consult you not just about space exploration, but about risk management, decision-making under uncertainty, maintaining focus during extended challenges, you've also gained appreciation for what Earth provides effortlessly: atmosphere, gravity, ecosystem services, social connection. These gifts, taken for granted by people who've never left, appear miraculous from your perspective. Every breath of unrecycled air, every step in normal gravity, every conversation without communication delay represents luxury beyond measure. The question everyone asks: was it worth it? The answer defies simple formulation. Worth implies comparison, trading one thing for another and evaluating whether the exchange provided net benefit. But what did you trade exactly? Years of normal life, physical health, psychological ease? And what did you gain? Knowledge, accomplishment, perspective. These categories don't map cleanly onto each other. Perhaps the question itself is wrong. Some experiences transcend cost-benefit analysis. Climbing Everest, crossing Antarctica, diving to ocean depths. These accomplishments carry meaning independent of practical utility. They represent human capabilities' outer boundaries, achievements pursued not because they're useful, but because they're possible. Your Jupiter mission fits this category. Returning from Jupiter remains humanity's hardest space achievement. Harder than moon landings, despite Apollo's drama and historical significance. Harder than Mars missions, should they eventually occur. The combination of distance, duration, radiation, and isolation creates challenges that resist technological solution. Future missions will be easier than yours, but never easy in any absolute sense. You've shown it's possible. That's your legacy, not the specific measurements you collected or systems you tested, but rather the simple demonstration that humans can go to Jupiter and return. Everything else builds on that foundation. Whether humanity chooses to build there determines your mission's ultimate significance. For now, you rest. Your body continues healing, slowly and incompletely. Your mind processes experiences that will occupy you for remaining decades. You've done your part. What happens next depends on others. Engineers designing better spacecraft, politicians allocating budgets, future astronauts accepting missions you've made conceivable. Jupiter remains out there, magnificent and terrible, waiting for whoever comes next. You've returned, but something of you stayed behind, orbiting endlessly in the darkness between worlds. That's the real cost of going so far from home. You can return to Earth, but you can never completely return to who you were before you left. The numbers tell one story. 250,000 kilograms of propellant consumed, 17 critical system failures overcome, 8,000 hours of exercise fighting bone loss, 96 months away from Earth. These metrics quantify the mission in the ways engineers and accountants understand. They reduce your journey to spreadsheets and graphs. But numbers miss what actually happened out there. You didn't just travel to Jupiter. You carried human consciousness to the edge of what's survivable, then brought it back. Every decision made in isolation, every repair performed knowing failure meant death, every moment of doubt pushed aside because giving up wasn't an option. The spacecraft brought your body home. You brought back something more fragile, proof that minds shaped by Earth's gravity and 24-hour days can function at Jupiter's distance, can maintain purpose when home becomes a theoretical concept, can choose survival when surrender would be easier. The radiation damage accumulating in your cells right now represents physics doing what physics does. Charged particles don't care about human ambition. They collide with atoms, break molecular bonds, corrupt DNA sequences. Your shielding reduced exposure but couldn't eliminate it. Every hour near Jupiter added to a dose that will influence your remaining decades. Medical monitoring continues, tracking markers that might predict problems years before symptoms appear. You've accepted this. The consent forms you signed before launch weren't abstractions. They were acknowledgements that some costs get paid slowly, in installments spread across a lifetime. Your bones won't fully recover. The calcium lost during years of weightlessness doesn't simply return because you've resumed walking under Earth's gravity. Density rebuilds partially, plateaus, then stops. You've gained back enough to function, enough to avoid fractures from ordinary activities. But your skeleton knows it's spent a decade without load-bearing stress. The knowledge is written into its structure, readable in medical scans that show regions of permanent porosity. These physical markers matter less than you expected. Yes, they constrain activities. Yes, they require ongoing management, but they don't define the experience any more than a scar defines the injury that caused it. What defines your Jupiter mission isn't what it took from you, but what it revealed about what humans can endure when purpose exceeds comfort. The psychological adaptation proves harder to quantify. How do you measure the change in someone who watched Earth shrink to a dot, then spent years knowing rescue was impossible regardless of what went wrong? Standard assessments, questionnaires about mood, sleep quality, anxiety levels, capture symptoms but miss the fundamental shift. You process risk differently now. What others consider dangerous barely registers. What they find stressful seems manageable. Your calibration changed at Jupiter and won't recalibrate to Earth norms. This creates distance in relationships. People complain about things you can't take seriously anymore. Traffic delays, weather inconveniences, minor schedule disruptions. These register as problems to them, while you remember 18-hour repair sessions fixing life support systems, knowing the alternative was suffocation. The gap isn't bridgeable through explanation. They haven't experienced what you have. You can't unexperience it, so you nod and sympathize and feel separate. Other astronauts understand, but even they divide into categories. Those who've done long-duration missions relate to the isolation, the systems management stress, the peculiar combination of boredom and vigilance. But few have operated under Jupiter's specific conditions. The radiation intensity, the communication delays, the knowledge that you'd traveled farther from help than humans had ever been. Even within the astronaut community, your experience sits at an extreme. The mission's scientific return will take decades to fully analyze. Terabytes of data collected across months near Jupiter feed into research programs worldwide. Atmospheric scientists study wind patterns in cloud formations. Magnetosphere specialists analyze particle interactions in radiation belts. Geologists examine moon surface compositions. Your observations enabled this work, but you'll never see most results. Science moves slowly, building understanding incrementally through thousands of small insights. Rather than dramatic revelations, perhaps that's appropriate. Your mission wasn't about immediate answers, but rather about expanding the envelope of human capability. You demonstrated that Jupiter missions are survivable, not merely theoretical exercises that look good in proposals. The difference matters enormously for future planning. Missions that might happen differ fundamentally from missions that definitely won't. Engineers already incorporate your lessons. Radiation shielding designs reference exposure patterns your dosimeters recorded. Life support systems include redundancies addressing failures you encountered. Trajectory planning accounts for navigation challenges you documented. These improvements won't prevent all problems. Space exploration remains dangerous regardless of preparation, but they reduce unnecessary risks. Future crews will face difficulties you didn't, but they won't repeat your specific problems. The economic arguments continue, seemingly immune to actual mission results. Critics who opposed your mission before launch still oppose future missions, citing costs and risks you've already demonstrated can be managed. Supporters who advocated for your mission still advocate for expansion, citing achievements and potential you've already proven real. Your successful return changed calculations for people actually analyzing data, but barely moved positions based on ideology rather than evidence. This frustrates you occasionally, usually during public appearances where someone asks why we're wasting money in space while problems exist on Earth. The question assumes space exploration competes with terrestrial problem solving rather than contributing to it. Technologies developed for your mission, advanced materials, recycling systems, medical monitoring, already find applications in contexts having nothing to do with Jupiter. But explaining this takes longer than attention spans allow, so you offer simplified responses that satisfy without persuading. The children get it. Interestingly, when you visit schools and describe the mission, kids ask about the adventure, the discovery, the challenge. They don't need justification beyond, "We went because we could." Adults demand practical returns, measurable benefits, cost-benefit analyses. Children accept that some things matter because they're hard, because they're new, because they expand what's possible. Maybe that's wisdom rather than naivety. Your crewmates dispersed after rehabilitation, returning to various forms of normal life. You maintain contact through occasional messages, video calls that feel strange after years when communication meant 90-minute delays. The bond remains, forged under conditions that guaranteed either collective success or collective death. But you've each processed the experience differently, incorporated it into your lives in individual ways. Some speak publicly about the mission. Others prefer privacy. Some remain involved in space programs. Others chose completely different paths. The mission united you temporarily, but didn't determine your futures permanently. You've chosen to stay involved, consulting on mission planning and spacecraft design. This work provides purpose and utilizes experience that would otherwise sit unused. But it also means regular reminders of what you've lost, the capability to do again what you once did. Your body won't tolerate another mission. The radiation exposure alone precludes it. You're grounded permanently, contributing through knowledge rather than action. This limitation hurts more than the physical damage. You'd accept another decade of isolation, another round of bone loss and muscle atrophy, if it meant returning to space. The view from Jupiter orbit, watching storms larger than Earth swirl through hydrogen atmospheres. The absolute silence between equipment noise when you could hear your own heartbeat and nothing else. The peculiar clarity that comes from being utterly, completely alone except for a handful of people in a tiny metal shell. You'd go back, but you can't, so you help others go instead. The hardest part of returning from Jupiter wasn't the re-entry heating or the radiation exposure or the physiological damage. It was discovering that you can't fully return from somewhere that changed you fundamentally. Part of you remains at Jupiter, will always remain there, orbiting in the darkness between worlds. You brought your body back to Earth, but something essential stayed behind, and Earth has nothing that can replace it. People ask if you have regrets. The question assumes you had a choice, as if you could have simply decided not to go. But people who choose missions like yours don't experience them as choices in the usual sense. The mission was always going to happen. The only question was whether you'd be aboard. Not going would have been unthinkable, even knowing the costs. Regret implies wishing things were different. You don't wish that. You wish Jupiter was closer, the radiation was weaker, the return was easier. But given the universe as it actually exists, you'd make the same decision again. The mission's ultimate value won't be known for decades, possibly centuries. Maybe you opened pathways that lead to sustained human presence throughout the solar system. Maybe you demonstrated limits that constrain exploration to robots and automated systems. Maybe your mission becomes a historical curiosity, impressive but not transformative, like early polar expeditions that proved technically successful but didn't fundamentally change human civilization. History will judge. You just did it. The spacecraft that carried you to Jupiter and back sits in a museum now, cleaned and preserved, surrounded by informational plaques explaining the mission. Tourists photograph it, marveling at the heat shield scarring and the cramped interior. School groups take notes for reports. The spacecraft looks smaller than you remember, less capable, more fragile, but it accomplished what it needed to accomplish. It brought you home. You visit occasionally, standing in front of the capsule, remembering the smell of recycled air, the subtle vibration of operating systems, the view through windows that showed first distant Earth, then enormous Jupiter, then distant Earth again. The memories remain vivid despite years passing. Some experiences don't fade. They just become part of who you are. A child approaches during one visit, maybe 10 years old, asking if you really went to Jupiter. You confirm that you did. The child asks what it was like. You consider simplified answers. It was hard. It was amazing. It was scary. But none capture the truth. So you tell the child something else. You say that going to Jupiter and coming back was the hardest thing you ever did, and also the most important, and that if given the chance, you'd do it again tomorrow. The child nods, processing this, then asks the question that matters. Can I go someday? You look at this child, this potential future explorer, and feel something shift. Maybe your mission wasn't about the measurements you collected or the systems you tested. Maybe it was about standing here, years later, telling a child that yes, you can go. It's hard, it might hurt you, it might change you permanently, but you can go. Humans have done it. Humans can do it again. The child smiles and runs off to rejoin their group. You watch them go, thinking about the spacecraft that will carry them, the technologies that will protect them, the lessons that will guide them. Technologies that exist because you went first. Lessons learned from your mistakes and successes. They'll face different challenges than you faced, but they'll face them because you proved facing them was possible. That's what returning from Jupiter means. Not just the trajectory mechanics or the propulsion requirements or the radiation shielding. It means going somewhere impossibly far, surviving what shouldn't be survivable, and coming back to tell others it can be done. The technical achievement matters, but the demonstration matters more. You leave the museum as it's closing, walking out into evening air that still feels rich and thick after years of recycled atmosphere. Earth's sky stretches overhead, stars beginning to appear as daylight fades. Jupiter isn't visible tonight. Wrong season, wrong time. But you know where it is. You always know where it is. Some part of you tracks it constantly, aware of its position, even when it's hidden below the horizon. The difficulty of returning from Jupiter can't be measured in delta V calculations or radiation doses or mission duration. Those numbers matter for planning and engineering, but they don't capture what it actually takes. What it takes is accepting that you'll be changed permanently, that parts of you will stay behind, that returning means coming back different than you left. It takes willingness to pay costs that accumulate slowly, revealing themselves only across years and decades. It takes commitment to something larger than personal comfort or safety. Most people won't make that trade. Most people shouldn't, but some will. And they'll do it because you showed them it's possible. They'll suffer like you suffered, sacrifice like you sacrificed, and return like you returned. Damaged but triumphant, diminished but enlarged, physically home but spiritually still orbiting in the darkness between worlds. That's the real answer to whether it was worth it. Your body bears the scars. Your mind carries the memories. Your life follows trajectories determined by choices made years ago in a spacecraft impossibly far from home. And despite everything, despite all of it, you do it again. Not because it was easy or safe or comfortable, because it was hard, because it mattered, because humans go to Jupiter and return not when it's practical or affordable or risk-free, but when someone decides the destination matters more than the difficulty. You decided, you went, you returned, and now Jupiter waits for whoever comes next, magnificent and terrible, and impossibly far away, exactly as far as it's always been. The distance hasn't changed. What changed is the knowledge that humans can cross it. That knowledge, purchased with radiation exposure and bone loss and a decade of your life, might be the most valuable thing you brought back from Jupiter. Not data or samples or measurements, but proof. Simple, undeniable proof that it can be done.